Hey everyone, welcome to Mountain Beast Mysteries. Back in 1993 in the Nordegg area here in Alberta, there was a really substantial Bigfoot encounter that took place. It became one of the most famous cases, I think, in the province. It happened at a place called Camp Alexo, which is, if you're driving to Nordegg from like Rocky Mountain House, it's a little ways before the actual town site. You'd turn like south off the highway. It's called Camp Alexo. There's like a youth camp area that exists there. I think it still exists to this day. So in the summer they'd have like groups of youth going there to, do outdoorsy things, and it's like a summer camp kind of deal. But back in '93, there was a group of kids who were there. They were teenagers, and one night they decided to go for a walk to find this old cemetery that they were told about. So they head south from the camp and they come upon these train tracks, these really old train tracks. And they are walking down these tracks to look for the cemetery, and they eventually find it, and they spend about an hour just exploring the area in the dark. They have flashlights and just a little adventure that they were going on. Well, after about an hour, they decided it was probably best to head back. It was getting late. And as they're heading back up the train tracks, they hear a scream. Well, one of the girls that was in the group screamed, and when they turned to see like what she was screaming at, they saw her flashlight pointed up at this tower, and they were shocked at what they saw. Now in the report, like the guy who actually wrote the report was saying like what he saw pretty much haunts him to this day. It was something he didn't expect to see. As a 16-year-old kid, he saw this creature standing on top of this tower. Now, the tower wasn't an actual tower. What it was a bunch of like wood beams that were constructed. I think it was about 20 or 25 feet high. In the report, the kid says it was like 40 feet, but in reality, after the investigations later on, it was about 20 to 25 feet. It was like a wooden tower structure on the side of the tracks that was used to like load coal, onto the trains and whatnot. But on top of this tower, there was a Sasquatch creature standing there, like on this tower. And it put its arms up, and they could see the long hair hanging off its arms. And this thing jumped off the tower over 20 feet. The kid said that like it jumped off that thing and hit the ground with such ease, it would have been comparable to if he just like jumped off like the curb on a sidewalk. It was like nothing for it. Imagine witnessing that in the dark. You see the flashlight shining on this thing on the tower, and it leaps off this 25-foot tower. What a spectacular thing to witness. What a freaky thing to witness. And they all saw it. I think there was somewhere between 15 and 20 kids that were there. And when it jumped down, it hit the ground, it took off into the bushes, and there was like loud cracks and snaps of branches breaking and whatnot. And then about a minute of silence. And after that minute of silence, there was a loud scream. So just imagine experiencing that as a kid. And you have multiple witnesses seeing the same thing. Now, supposedly, the people who ran the camp said that, there was a lot of reports in the area, a lot of Sasquatch reports. It had a history of sightings, which is interesting. This area is actually very easy to find, and it's very easy to get to. So I feel like it'd make a very good research spot this coming summer. Definitely worth checking out and looking at that old tower and, making some videos on that. But a few years later in 1998, there was another encounter that was reported. There was a kid, he was about 9 years old, and he was at that same summer camp. They were all playing a game, like with the camp leaders and everything. Everyone was playing a game that spanned like the whole pretty much area of the camp, like boundary to boundary. And this kid was by himself in the woods, walking along, running along. He trips over a log, And when he goes to get up, he sees a Sasquatch creature standing there with its arm kind of grabbing a tree, and this thing's watching him. It's totally covered in hair, has a face much wider than a human's, a really wide mouth, and this thing's watching him, and it eventually takes off, leaving this kid traumatized. The kid apparently was screaming, like as soon as he saw it, he started screaming. And in both cases, in the encounter at the tower and the encounter with this kid, there was a strange smell lingering in the air. Now, obviously, they're a few years apart, 5 years apart, but there's a very good possibility that it was the exact same creature, the exact same one. It's interesting to think like these things are lurking around that summer camp where there's kids playing around. Like, it's kind of creepy too. You know, it would be very easy, especially in the story with the 9-year-old who tripped. It would be very easy for one of these creatures to just snatch one of those kids and take off. That's like the freaky thing about it. It has, you know, all the ingredients to become a missing 411 story. Not too far away from there, closer to Rocky Mountain House, on one of the reserves, there was that one kid who photographed what he thinks was a Sasquatch, and there was images of it that were floating around the internet for quite a while. I can't remember his name. I think his first name was Kevin something, I can't remember, but he was a young boy who ended up witnessing this Sasquatch creature, and it took off down into a river and like crossed the river, but he managed to snap a few photos of it on like an iPad. So there's a lot of instances of this happening in the Nordegg area, of young people coming upon these things in the wilderness when they least expect it. That Sasquatch in the tower story was in the perfect position to be observing people. It probably heard them. You know, you'd imagine a group of kids would be quite loud. They're off in the woods at night having an adventure, having fun. That thing probably heard that and climbed up onto that tower, you know, to observe them. That is creepy. That is very creepy. And just knowing that it could jump that high and land and just take off, it really makes you wonder, do these things climb trees? Probably. It seems like they can move and do physical things like that that are like, that would be impossible for a human being to do anyways. So it might be worth, if you're exploring the woods at night, say you're in a camp area, you know, you got your tent set up, so you're doing research or whatnot. If you're gonna go out looking for stuff at night, it might be worth every now and then shining your flashlight up into the trees to see if there's anything up there, you know. The youth camp is just like an interesting spot. There'd be a lot of crazy activities going on, you know. It'd be very interesting for, you know, a Sasquatch, like a very curious Sasquatch. It'd be interesting for them. You know, they'd want to go check that out and see what all the commotion is. So, and it's an area where they can observe people, and people who are not very threatening. Like a kid is not nearly as threatening as an adult. So they could come close to this camp, observe people, learn about them, and it'd be relatively low risk. It'd be different than approaching like a group of hunters or, you know, something of the sort. But that area I really want to check out this summer. I mean, this was back in the 90s, but that doesn't mean, you know, they wouldn't be around, they wouldn't come around. There's still reports that happen at all these campsites around Nordegg. So, yeah, it's just, you never know. You never know when you're out where these things are. They could be hiding all around you, up in the trees, up on the cliffs. You have no idea, just watching you. If that girl didn't shine her light up there, they probably wouldn't have seen it. They probably would have walked right by it again, got to camp, and nothing would have happened. It's interesting though to think of, like, with the appearance of these creatures. They always seem to have a really long hair, long, thin, like human-like hair, or even comparable to like an orangutan or something like that. And it appears like the ones that show up in this Nordegg area, they do carry like some sort of strange smell, some sort of strange body odor. I feel like Sasquatch are more likely to approach people in areas where there's already established like settlements. In this case, it's the youth camp. In other cases, it could be like an abandoned lease site or an old trail that doesn't get used much, or even trails that do get used quite often sometimes, especially in the national parks. But that gives them the advantage. They know where the trails are, they know where abandoned lease sites are, they know where these camps are, and it gives them the edge, it gives them an advantage. So they can kind of predict where people are gonna be to a degree, as long as people stay on the trail, which most people do when they go out hiking in the mountains, especially if they don't have experience and they don't know what they're doing. A lot of people will just stick to the trail and they won't risk going off the beaten path. So it gives Sasquatch a tactical advantage. They can predict where people are going to be, and it's safer for them. So I don't even know nowadays, thinking about it, how, is it even worth really going far off trail or into these really remote areas? It almost seems like it's a better option to stick to areas that give them that edge, and make you a little bit more vulnerable. So that's all I wanted to really talk about today. Just a couple really interesting encounters from Nordegg. Some of the most notable ones, I think anyways. And ones, that could have ended poorly, especially the one with the little boy who, was by himself. Imagine going through that as a little kid. How traumatizing would that be? What would you be thinking, seeing something like that? It would be a monster. It would be a monster. And the way the kid reacted, he probably was thinking exactly that. So, thanks for watching this video. We'll see you next time on Mountain Beast Mysteries.